Friends, we have big energy news out there. The U.S. Department of Energy has authorized the temporary and emergency release of 1 million barrels of oil due to some serious problems happening out there in the refining and manufacturing spaces. We're going to talk about what's happening with energy. We're going to talk about particularly gasoline, diesel, jet fuel. These type of things are vital to the functioning of the U.S. economy, as well as getting us from point A to point B. We're going to jump into this and we're going to talk about what's actually happening, what happened, and what will be happening going forward. And we're going to see how this is part of a bigger problem overall. We just don't have enough refining capability here in the United States. All right, friends, we got a lot to talk about. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Poplar Report. I'm Steve Poplar. I'm an accountant by trade, and we're covering things that the mainstream media just won't cover. And if you think that you're going to hear about this out on the mainstream media, you got another thing coming. Because this is definitely being swept under the rug, and they're hoping nobody notices. And the dangerous part about this is if anything goes wrong, we're all going to notice it because we're going to be showing up to empty gas pumps. All right, so the U.S. Department of Energy authorized an emergency release of 1 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. That's not a small amount. That is like a Biden level amount, okay? We got a lot of oil coming in from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve into U.S. refineries. And the reason for this is that the Mars crude oil has been impacted by high levels of zinc, or as they would call it, contaminated with high levels of zinc. Now, without getting into all the nitty-gritty of it, basically the refineries that we're talking about here in the U.S. cannot deal with zinc in the oil. That level of zinc is going to damage the equipment and is going to damage the refinery. So the Exxon refinery in Baton Rouge took on a load of Mars oil, and they found out too late that it had high levels of zinc. And they're like, well, we can't shove this into the refinery because that will break the refinery. So they have a couple of problems. One, what do we do with all this oil that we have that we can't use? Two, where do we get oil to put into the refinery, or do we just shut down the refinery? And number three, since you got all that oil sitting there, that's a place where the replacement oil would go to. So, like, how do you make it go away? Because it's taking up space that should be where the good oil is supposed to be. All right, so the Department of Energy, knowing that Exxon Mobil at the Baton Rouge refinery is in quite a bind. Now, we're not talking about some random refinery. We're not talking about some out-of-the-way small refinery. This is the 6th largest refinery in the United States. And like I said, this is part of a tapestry of problems that we have when it comes to refineries. We've talked about that a little bit before. We've talked about how we have a shortage of refining capability here in the United States, and whenever a hurricane comes through and shuts down the Gulf Coast refineries, we start having a world of hurt. And the reason for that is because we don't have enough surge capacity to basically kind of make up for when we have a shortage. So if the refineries shut down and we start having a slump in gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and all the other oil-related products, we have lower stockpiles of that, which causes problems, and we can't crank up the refineries to 110% to kind of make up for the time that they were shut down. We used to have a lot of spare refinery capability here in the U.S., but now we do not. And why is that? It's because the EPA and its allies, the word ally now just feels dirty, doesn't it? Anyway, and its allies were have made it so that it's basically impossible to build a refinery in the United States today. Like if you're like, I got Elon Musk on board, and he's the richest guy in the world, so let's build a refinery here in the United States. It couldn't be done. You cannot build a refinery in the United States anymore. The environmental regulations make it literally impossible to build a refinery, which is problematic because the refineries that you have are all the refineries that you will ever have in the United States. And as we have refineries shutting down one after the next, and none of them are being replaced with newer refineries. Now, granted, the ones that are getting phased out are usually the smaller refineries that are less efficient, that are less useful to society at large. But the problem is, every little bit of refining capability that we lose, we can't expand the refineries that we have because the EPA rules. We can't change the refineries over from their current configurations, which makes very little sense. That's where we get into the situation where we have oil coming out of the fracking in Pennsylvania and Ohio that's then being loaded onto ships and being sent over to the Middle East. Yes, we are exporting oil to the Middle East. Then those tankers dropping off the Appalachian oil to the Middle East at their refineries, then picks up a load of Saudi crude oil and then brings that back to the United States, where we then shove it into our refineries, turn it into diesel, gasoline, and spit it out, which doesn't really make much sense, right? Now, that's just kind of the oil that's coming out of the ground in the fracking industry through that. Our refineries just are not capable of dealing with that type of oil. Now, the new refineries over in Saudi Arabia and over in the Gulf states can handle, because they just look at a patch of sand and they're like, we're going to build a refinery here, okay? And they do, because they don't have an EPA over there. So they build a refinery, and it works. Anyway, so U.S. refineries can't use a lot of American oil. Now, they can use oil from the Gulf Coast. We have those fracking, not the fracking plant. We have the offshore oil platforms in the Gulf. That oil, Mars oil, can be used in the refineries. Also, Alaskan oil can come down through the Panama Canal and be used in those refineries as well. But there's not enough of that. They've been built with the mind of actually taking Saudi Arabian oil and making it into gasoline. So things are just stupid. It's just the way it is. And it's that way because the environmentalists made it that way. Anyway, so we have X amount of refining capability, and it keeps dropping every year. We have less capacity this year than we did last year. We had several refineries in California shut down. Well, I think they're in the process of shutting down. So we're going to lose 2 refineries in California, and that's going to really hurt California because they're making California's special blend of gasoline. If you ever wondered why California's gasoline costs so much, it's because California makes a special blend. Special in all the special senses. And it costs more, and the only people on the planet that use that blend of gasoline is in California. So they want to make something creative, and they want to have this special stuff. Well, it's only made in one place in the world, and that's at the refineries in California. Of course, California has a bunch of flaming liberals who look at refineries and say refineries are evil. Let's shut them down. We don't want to have that garbage here in California. Which is okay, but California is the only place where you make your special blend of gasoline. So the refineries that you're trying to shut down in California are the only ones that actually make that stupid blend of gasoline. Now, somebody else will probably step up. Some Texas refinery will probably make that special blend of gasoline for them. And then it has to ship all the way around down through the Panama Canal and come up to be sold in California for a much higher price. So we expect to see gasoline prices in California continue to go upwards, and they really have no one except themselves to blame on that. Anyway, they're losing about 18% of their refining capability. And like I said, we're not adding any refining capability anywhere else. We're just keeping it. Now, they're making less money on refining fuels across the board. And because of that, we have companies like Marathon. Marathon Petroleum last year announced that they're going to be cutting their utilization rate at their 13 refineries in the U.S. from 97% down to 90%. So before they're like, well, we're going to have our max capacity of, if we lived in a perfect world and we never shut down our refinery, we produce 100%. But we have maintenance and those type of issues, and they've been running at 97% utilization. Well, they announced last year that they're actually going to be dropping that down to 90%. And we're talking about millions and millions of barrels of oil refined per day. And we're looking at, they're going to be cutting that capacity. We got other companies that are doing the same thing, where it's like, it's cheaper for us to only run at 90% capacity than to kind of really stress ourselves about running it at 95, 97% capacity. When it shuts down, when there's an issue, we have to like panic and hire the most expensive people to come in here. They're like, well, it's actually better if we shut down intentionally every so often and do a maintenance inspection of the whole facility. That way we can bring our engineers from all the other refineries to that refinery, shut the refinery down, and do a full inspection of everything and replace whatever needs to be replaced, fix anything that needs to be fixed, and then those engineers can go back to their refineries, right? This makes sense, right? Otherwise, when you're at 97%, you're basically waiting for something to break. And when something breaks, or you start seeing indications something's about to break, then you do an emergency stop, you shut down the refinery. All of a sudden, it's a surprise to everybody, and then you then try to scramble to get engineers in place that you need in order to fix this problem. And generally speaking, you fix that problem and you ignore everything else. Now, that's an oversimplification, because when they shut down the refinery and they have their engineers working on this problem over here, you get some other ones going, we really should probably go do this over here as well. And so some other guys will go over and take care of that issue or whatever. But you can see why it's advantageous to run at 90%, have scheduled outages where you shut down the refineries for maintenance, right? Now, they do scheduled maintenance anyway, but these are more scheduled maintenance things on the schedule. So Marathon is cutting its maintenance schedule so that they can produce less oil, but at the same time, they will be able to save more money. So it's not just that, but we're talking about the Baton Rouge Exxon Mobil refinery. They got this Mars oil in, and they tested it, and they found too much zinc. We can't use it. Now, there's other refineries that get the zinc out and deal with it. So what they need to do is they need to get back onto a super tanker, and they need to get it all on a super tanker and sent to go sell it to somebody. Somebody will buy it. Now, this oil apparently did come out of the Gulf of America. So it's American oil. So it will be exported, but they need replacement. So the plan is that they're going to borrow 1 million barrels of oil, which is basically 2 days worth of oil for this refinery. They're going to get 1 million barrels of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. They're then going to eventually pay it back with interest back to the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. So they'll go out and buy more oil, and then they will then pay back the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. So that's not bad necessarily for the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, but it kind of goes to show that they decided to start pulling back the refinery there in Baton Rouge, and the Department of Energy said, this is not good. We don't have spare capacity. We can't have the sixth largest refinery in the U.S. shut down for any period of time. It's better for us to spot them in the oil and have them pay us back. We get an IOU from Exxon because, I mean, they would never short the government, right? So we get an IOU from Exxon that they're going to pay the oil back, and they're going to pay a little extra oil kind of for the process. And that's kind of how that's going to go. It just goes to show how short and tight our refining capability in the United States is. And this is just before we head into hurricane season. Traditionally, we actually hit the lowest gasoline stockpiles usually around November, December, because the hurricanes will impact refining capabilities. It will shut down these refineries, and they will produce less gasoline. Some gasoline may get destroyed in the tanks. We may see a lot more oil, gasoline used up in recovery efforts down after a hurricane comes through. So we got a hurricane season starting, and we're already starting to see the stockpiles of gasoline and diesel dropping, and there just isn't enough capacity in the United States to kind of make up for it. So, are we going to see shortages at your local, pumps right now? No, we won't see that. But as we go into this period where we start seeing those stockpiles get drawn down, could you start seeing more issues as we go into this year? If we have a hurricane or two that comes in and messes stuff up, yeah, we could very well see some spotty outages of gasoline, diesel, because while we have stockpiles of diesel and gasoline, the problem is that those have to be pre-positioned all around the country. And if we need more gasoline at a certain place, there just isn't like a big stockpile waiting to be sent to them. There's regional stockpiles, and those aren't always spread evenly. So when we start losing stockpiles, that can sometimes impact one area significantly more. It's not like you got enough gasoline over in Oregon. Well, that's kind of irrelevant to people in Georgia. They can't just get a truck of it over there and just truck it all the way over. That's highly inefficient, extremely expensive, and it still takes, 3 days to drive? 4 days to drive? Yeah, that's just not possible. It takes months and months to reposition gasoline stockpiles and diesel. Usually what happens is instead of actually moving it from one stockpile to the other, what they do is they just stop sending stuff there and they start sending more over to the new place or the place where there's the shortage. All right, friends, we'll keep an eye on this, but the situation, refining capability continues to drop in the U.S., and we're getting to be a point where it's dropping faster than Americans' consumption of gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. All right, friends, we'll keep on top of this. We'll let you know any updates as they happen, but we'll particularly be watching during hurricane season. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to check out another video from this channel, there's one right up there. I'll see you over there, or I'll see you guys later. Steve Poplar of the Poplar Report, out.